Well, hey everyone, it's a beautiful day here at Kirkfell Farm. I'm glad you could join us. You notice we didn't start the video with a shot of the rooster. That's because today is all about sheep. Today we're going to talk about 10 things you need to raise sheep. So firstly, you're going to need a cool sheep herding hat. Now what I'm wearing is a traditional Cumbrian flat cap. It's a brown and gray herringbone tweed pattern. Now when a sheep sees you wearing a hat like this, they pretty much automatically give you shepherd respect. People not so much, but the sheep definitely. My granddad actually wore a hat like this for many years. He was a shepherd at the Askham Hall estate near Penrith in Cumbria. So it's not just a cool hat, there's actually quite a bit of family history there. Now the second thing you're going to need is the support of your spouse and your family. When I first asked Carmen if I could spend $1,000 on a starter flock, actually she said she was surprised that I even asked. So I kind of took that as implied permission. I mean, she didn't say I couldn't. The third thing you're going to need is high quality feed. Now I'm guessing you're not raising sheep as some kind of exotic pet. If you are, you're probably more eccentric than I am. I'm guessing you're probably raising them either for meat or for wool or perhaps even both. So if you're looking for any one of those things, you're going to need to have good feed. So we're very fortunate here during the summer to be able to raise the sheep on pasture. We do a process of rotational grazing where the sheep are able to eat on a section of grass for a while and then they fertilize that ground and we move them on to another section. One of the challenges we face here, I mean, if you look at it, this is what we see for 6, sometimes 7 months of the year. So if we're not able to feed them on pasture, then we've got to feed them hay and then supplement with grain. So now you might also be wondering, should I grain train my sheep? So essentially it's a reward system where you bring grain out to the sheep, they follow you. If they do what you want them to do, they get a bit of grain. Now the answer to that is yes, yes, and yes. Sheep are very trainable. The one thing you just have to watch is how much grain you're giving them. If you're giving them too much, you can give them bloat. So just make sure it's rationed appropriately by the number of sheep you're going to train. The fourth thing you're going to need is a reliable source of water. So again, you see behind me here, 7 months of the year, we don't have open water. So we are blessed during the summer. We've got 3 dugouts here plus a flowing creek that provides water to our animals all through the summer months. But during the winter time, in behind me here, we've got one waterer over there and it actually supplies water. It's heated, supplies water to the bulls, to the ewes, and to the horses. But the rest of the year, come the end of September, we've got to be prepared for packing water if we're going to keep any animals out of pasture and then changing that out every single day. The fifth thing you're going to need is shelter. So your sheep need shelter. I mean, as you can see Gertrude back here, I think that's Gertrude. Hey Gertrude. She's pretty well insulated, but she still needs a place to get out of the wind, out of the rain, out of the snow. And it'll be up to them whether or not they use it. Sheep aren't always the brightest, and so sometimes they'll just stay out there and die. Unfortunately, we learned that lesson the hard way the other day, but yeah, you got to provide some shelter for them, and it doesn't have to be complicated. Our 2 shelters are actually made out of pallets and some reclaimed material, and they provide all the shelter necessary for our animals. So there's probably a whole series of videos I could do on handy things to do with pallets. The sixth thing your sheep are going to need is minerals. So while your sheep need minerals, not all minerals are created equal. So don't be trying to give your sheep the same minerals that maybe you would feed to your goats or to your cows. Looks like the donkey really agrees with me on that one. The issue is that a lot of the cattle mineral has copper in it, and copper can be quite toxic to sheep, so best to avoid that. Now, if you're wondering what type of mineral to use, you can talk to other local producers, see what they're using, as well as talk to your local feed store, maybe your vet, get recommendations on what type of mineral and salt program to be on. So the seventh thing you're going to need is fencing. Our farm here is surrounded by buffalo wire, and we thought that was going to be the answer to all our problems. But the buffalo wire actually has pretty large openings. And so if the sheep really wanted to, they can get through it pretty easily. And adversely, you know, a predator can also get in pretty easily. So not the best solution for, it works pretty good for perimeter fencing, but not all that great in the long run. So you might want to consider electric fencing, or you can see here we have the sheep netting. It's just got 4-inch squares. We top it with a row of barbed wire. And it provides enough discouragement to them to try and, they do test it quite often, but nobody's ever got through this stuff, so works pretty well. But the electric fencing, just keep in mind with electric fencing that it's not actually a physical barrier. Sheep are pretty well insulated from electricity, so in the spring it works really well, just because the shock can actually make contact with the soft skin. But they get a good thick layer of wool there, and they won't even feel that shock. So if you are going to train your sheep to an electric fence, you're going to want to do it very, very quickly, either when they're very young or on a yearly basis just after they've been sheared. And the other thing you need to consider with electric fencing too is where is your power supply coming from. So here most of our pastures are quite a ways away from actual AC power. And so we do run a solar fencing system, which works great during the summertime because we get, you know, sometimes like 20 hours of sunlight in a day. But this time of year, in December and January and so on, it's greatly reduced. And so in the wintertime, solar power just isn't really a viable option for us. The eighth thing you're going to want to consider is friends. Friends are fun, right? So sheep are a flock animal, and if you're going to keep one by itself, it's going to cause the animal a lot of stress. And that goes for if you have a ram as well. So if you do have a ram that you want to keep separated from your ewes for a good portion of the year because you don't want them to breed, then put it with a wether or some other type of companion animal. We do have a miniature donkey and some miniature ponies. Word of caution, we found actually they weren't suitable companion animals, and you might have different experiences, but our experience was that a donkey or a miniature pony will fight a sheep to the death. Number 9 is space. How much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Or essentially, how many sheep can I fit per acre on my homestead? Well, there's a lot of factors that go into that, but kind of a rule of thumb is that you can fit anywhere kind of closely between 6 and 10 sheep per acre. Now, what you have to ask yourself is not so much can I run 6 to 10 sheep per acre on my homestead, but can that acre actually sustain the amount of sheep I want? So in some cases, very fertile areas, warm climates, good grass, you can maybe have almost 15 per acre. In other areas where you don't get a lot of sunlight, you don't get a lot of moisture, the soil conditions are poor, you may only be able to run 1 or 2 per acre. So you're also going to need to consider what breed of sheep you have. So here at the farm we've got a mix. We have Shetlands, we have some Arcots, and we have some Dorsets. Now the Shetlands are a smaller breed, and they're pretty happy just eating scrubby grass, browse. They'll eat pretty much anything you put in front of them. They're just happy to be here. Whereas the Dorsets, like Mavis back there, she's just a grass-eating machine. So she would clean up an acre of grass by herself pretty quickly if it in a dry year. So if you're like us, where we have a limited growing season and small pens, you might want to consider rotational grazing. So now you might have an acre of land, but how far can I stretch that acre of land? So if you're only running a few sheep, you might get 3 rotations out of it. But generally, once your sheep have been on a section of land, you're going to want to turn them to a different portion and not return them back there for 45 to 60 days. So here in northern Alberta, that's essentially half or half of your growing season. So you're going to need to have enough paddocks assigned for your ewes so that they will only come back to that same paddock maybe twice in 1 year. Now it's necessary at this point to explain what happens at that 45 to 60 days. So at 45 days, that's generally when it's safe to assume that the grass is recovered and the sheep could return without overgrazing the ground. However, just keep in mind it takes approximately 60 days to actually break the pest cycle completely. So for all the parasites that may be living in the sheep manure to actually die off to a point where it's safe to return any livestock back to that paddock. The 10th and final thing you're going to need to raise sheep on your homestead is patience. So the first year we got sheep here at the farm, we got them from a small homestead up in Fairview. And I would say that they were handled, but they were handled very differently, I think, than we were accustomed to. They had more of a free-ranging concept, and they could be herded or chased into, from a large area into a smaller area, and then consecutively into smaller and smaller areas until you could essentially catch them and do what you had to do with them. So they were pretty wild, and you put them in a pen and you could just go around and around and around for days. And they didn't really have a lot of respect for fences. So every day our neighbors would call and, oh, we've got critters out on our lawn. And so it was interesting times. So during that first year, we really learned the value of high quality fencing. We got a lot of involuntary exercise, and I think we taught our neighbors a few new curse words. They could hear us bellowing at the sheep to get back in their fence. Hey. So if you're considering getting into sheep, I think it's a wonderful idea. Would really encourage you to do it. Just make sure you do your homework first, know what you're getting into. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to click subscribe down below, and we'll see you next time. What do you think of the sheep, Charlotte? You love them? Yeah.